and it is about something which is really personal to me. Generation One has its life well inside me from my own childhood. First of all, that training to lead to the smashing of welfare out of their lives, out of their families' lives, is what has really driven me to invite you here this morning and to feel so personally grateful to Tim Gartrell, all the Generation One team, and most of all, you, our supporters, that is sharing with us a vision of a unified Australia where our first and every other Australian has no disparity between it. Our generation, thank you.
I'm Jenny Brockey. I've been invited to facilitate this afternoon's discussion. The theme is employment that lasts for Indigenous Australians.
From our perspective, our experience has been that the most successful reconciliation action plans are those that have complete staff buy-in at all levels of the organisation and leadership.
And people say, oh, you should get cultural awareness first and make it, all nice and whatever. Well, we don't know what's right and what's wrong other than what works. So if we put some employment in place, people naturally want to learn more. Doing this for a business reason gets a lot of engagement up front. All of a sudden, it's not a funded program. We're actually doing this for business reasons.
What's working is getting business involved. There's been a sea change, I think, in business looking at this and saying, what can we do or how do we do things, rather than it's too hard.
The key thing for us is it's about local community engagement. I think Melinda or Leah was mentioning around the importance of that local community engagement, because for us, if you ram something down one's throat, you're not going to get that genuine ownership. And for us going forward, corporate Australia is the answer. Small to medium enterprises do provide real sustainable economic opportunities. And more importantly, what's working for us is a 100% Indigenous managed organisation.
All right, well, to me, best practice is where the chairman and the chief executive of any organisation, of any industry across Australia, steps up and says, I want to be part of the generation of change. I want to put my organisation on the line to employ Indigenous people, and I want to accept every help I can get in order to create that inside my own company, because my own company becomes a more valuable, more culturally rich, more stronger in terms of its own morale amongst its workforce, simply by employing Indigenous people. Indigenous people, our first Australians, want those opportunities, they want that relevant training, and with us believing in them, they believe in themselves to take those opportunities.
Mentoring is important, but it has to be seen as something that is a core part of any sort of training that is provided, that it's a part of being a professional development strategy and has to be resourced appropriately by the organisation.
It's all about choices and giving us a choice to become self-sustainable at the end of the day and stop the disparity, get us off welfare, and it's all of us together working together to break the cycle.
Before we move on, anyone else got any comments about what you think works in terms of lasting employment, the kinds of elements you need to put in place?
I think one of the things that we really do need to do is to embed in our people the need to strive in education. Unfortunately, a lot of what happens today in schools is the promotion of sports and sports participation. We forget that academic profiles are the only things that people look at.
How does culture play into that, both Indigenous culture and business culture?
In some communities, they've never seen the world of work or don't even understand what that means. So employment in some spaces is quite rare. And for us, what we've got to build is this notion of a career, more so than a job, but more importantly, the understanding of moving forward to reach your full potential and getting off welfare.
There's a kind of welfare culture. It's a culture that things are given to you, and after a while, it becomes so easy, you lose your will, you actually lose your drive. And that's a welfare culture. And I would like to say, we need to demand more from our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and it starts from the ground up. You have people working inside those training organisations who have a real empathy, who have a real heart. I'm not talking about professionally trained mentors, I'm talking about people just like us. They're working out, hey, you really do care for me. You are out there, you're putting yourself out, getting into my home, dragging me out of bed. I'm going to get up for you. And that starts to break down that welfare culture, because you're saying, I believe in you, you matter. I care for you, you matter. And therefore, once once that sinks into an Indigenous person who's been on welfare for a long time, you release that wonderful energy, that passion, which you're beginning to see now, which results in very successful Aboriginal people in all walks of our community.
So if you really want to make progress, you have to allow for the Indigenous people to make their own minds how they want to live and what they want to do.
You go into communities and they say, well, our only contact is with welfare groups and with government. How can we create the full spectrum of choice for our kids and for our future if that's our experience?
Satisfying the need of the corporation to get results and to have those results illustrated at the same time as taking a whole community along with the journey, or our organisation going with that community on their journey. It's a real interesting balancing act, and every day goes by we're trying to bring those two dynamics together. And as Andrew said, it's identify the people in that middle ground to bring those two different spheres of thought together.
Even kids who are staying to year 12 are not getting the quality of education, they are not coming out with the skills, and I'm generalising here, but there are too many who are not coming out with the basic skills in terms of literacy and numeracy that will enable them to have a solid stepping stone into a career or further education.
When you start to look into the schools, you see that as a school-based trainee host employer, we're making up for a hell of a lot of education that they're not getting in reality of work. Those schools that continually successfully produce kids into employment have got the right-minded school counsellors. They're looking for life beyond school for the kid, not just to keep the kid at school.
The parents of the kids. When I go to schools, and particularly Indigenous schools all around Australia, I go straight into the headmaster's office and says, tell me about how many blackfellas are enrolled in your school. Righto, it's a big number. How many come? On a good day and on a bad day? A good day it's about 70 to 80%. On a bad day it's about 30%. If they can hit up to 40 to 50%, it's not all bad. Because that's not as bad as some of the other schools is the excuse I get. I then go straight down into the Indigenous communities and say, look, parents, why aren't your kids at school? And they look at me fair back and say, what for? They're only going to get welfare, mate. They're not going to get the job opportunities. We never had it. Speak to Auntie Beryl. Perfect example, but Auntie Beryl's got up and gone.
Saying the emphasis there should be on business rather than government in providing that?
I think, no, government needs to provide better ways to ensure that the school to career pathways is actually happening, and that we gear up our young generation to ensure when they leave school that they have got the skill set, they have got the right career mindset to continue life in the world of work.
To close that gap, you make the employer responsible for the training, and that is more than possible.
So, you know, for the banking and finance industry, you know, to have collaboration with the major players to agree on what is an entry-level skill requirements. Okay.
Skill sets for individual industries, but specific to Indigenous people? Specific training to Indigenous people.
And specific to the industry.
It's got to be specific to industry, because if it's not, then it's where we are now. Because in some states, you know, training's just done for training's sake. You know.
The implication is almost, you know, if the kids finish year 12 and they haven't got the skills, you should take them on and train them. Well, that's great, and to be honest, some companies will do that. But very few can afford to take a new employee, and particularly if we're talking about, we've talked about the cultural awareness training and investment, all these other sorts of investments, and then actually put them through an extensive period of training, which is basically about teaching them what they should have learned at school.
If we are going to employ the lost generation, that is, as everybody I think knows, if we are going to employ those people, then employers are going to have to take workers that do not have Year 12 perfect skills, literacy skills. Now, that may seem as an obstacle to some employers, but I can tell you, and I know from working in Andrew Forrest's neck of the world, that some of the people that are now working on six-figure salaries as mining operators were illiterate people.
I think it's quite simple. if the government encourages industries which can really make a difference, and yes, it is mining, but it's also construction, it's also hospitality, it's also tourism. If the government encourages those industries to train their own people, and now we have this brand new and marvellous demand-side pull to get rid of the disparity. So there's no reason why the government shouldn't and wouldn't do it. If they encourage those industries to deliver the training themselves for the jobs they themselves have guaranteed, then other companies, tourism, manufacturing, construction or mining, will have the faith to continue the employment.
My really strong view is that we have to make sure that we don't have future lost generations. We've got a huge pool of people who are unemployed at the moment. The most obvious thing to do is to stop the flow into that pool of unemployment, which means lifting the standards so that kids coming out of school don't go into unemployment, they go into work or study.
How do you get the message through to those employers? Because they're primarily and simply involved in running their businesses, and I don't see any strategy yet for how to change the attitude of the guys on the ground to actually start to employ Indigenous people, let alone anybody else. Their rationale is still going to be to employ the best person for the job.
It's that local investment from the small to medium enterprise with the Indigenous career seeker, but more importantly, for the whole community.
I want to get a final thought from each of the panel about just what can be done to create lasting employment, the idea of the single thing that could be done.
It's because they were mentored by parents who believed not only in them, but that they could do it, that there would be opportunities for them, which really comes back to, I think, a government responsibility to get out and tell the Indigenous nations there are opportunities waiting for you. You and your kids can take those opportunities. The end of the disparity is in your sight and in your hands.
Regional employment strategies. Businesses working together in a region to deliver broad-based opportunities and a real pipeline of jobs.
The main ingredient for overcoming Indigenous disadvantage is to include community-led initiatives and building on that sort of regional things that, the onus for, economic development has to lie squarely with community leaders and Indigenous leaders to actually overcome that. So we have to give those decision-making powers to those people as well.
More focus on brokerage, putting that linkage between the demand and the supply. How do we skip some of those pipeline issues and better focus on brokerage and incentivifying some outcomes for brokers, not just the JSA network, but some brokers for outcomes will really quickly get the demand met.
Local community careers is so essential, and with that local community careers, it's not just about the Indigenous career seeker, it's about the small to medium enterprises as well as the corporate Australia companies, because I think what we need to do is have a national objective, but we need a localised approach in terms of the service delivery.
All right, I'd like to thank you all very much for taking part today. Could you please thank our panel?